Hello, everyone, and welcome to Your Mind, Your Reality, Your Results, a weekly live show where I speak with an expert in the subject of mindset so you can change your mindset and ultimately get the amazing results that you want in your life. I'm so pleased to be welcoming Maida to the show today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Leah, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Well, you guys are going to love this. I'm super happy you're with us today. If we haven't met before, my name is Leah Fink. I'm the owner and founder of All Thrive, and I help protect people from the pain of damaged relationships. If you're curious about what that means, I would love to connect, so please reach out. But you are not just here for me today. You are here to get the lovely expertise of Maida. So please comment, ask your questions. Even if you're not watching this show live, if you add questions for us, we will make sure to get back to you. So to start us off, I always love to ask the question of how did you become a transformational coach? How did you get here?
Sure. Well, it's been quite a journey. And, I am a person of metaphors, right? And I am a person that's deeply connected with nature. So, I feel like we're always on a path. And I've always had this heart and this passion to serve and to just see people's lives transform and just communities thrive. And so kind of growing up, kind of started on this path and on an educational kind of portion. I started off going to school for social work and I started working inner city. And though at the same time, actually literally the same time, I also found myself in some really challenging situations. I actually struggled with depression growing up, and through the lens that I saw the world with, ended up just really struggling with my own self-worth and self-esteem, not always making the healthiest relationship decisions, and ended up very young as a mother and a single mother. Eventually, by the age of 21, I had two children, two different fathers, and was really challenged because here I was studying social work. And I was, in a really unhealthy relationship. And I realized like, hey, this here, I'm supposed to be helping people out of these situations and I'm stuck in the situation myself. Right. Yeah. And so, but for me, it was like, this has got to go. This has got to change. Right. I have to be there to be strong for my children. And so it's really my own journey and my own path of figuring out like how to get myself into a place of healing, into a place of happiness. And I use that term kind of cautiously, right? Because I feel like oftentimes, we talk about wanting this happy and joyous life. And the reality is like life is messy, like life is sticky and messy. And, when you think about journeys, when you think about like going on a hike, right? Like, you can have those really nice paved paths in the forest, but a true hike that really brings you like joy and satisfaction is typically one where there's some bumps along the roads. There's probably moments in it where you're like, this kind of sucks. But then when you get, especially if anybody has done any hiking in the mountains, right? And you get to the summit and you're like, oh my goodness, right? Everything that I endured in that process was incredibly worth it, right? And so really that's been my own personal journey, and not just kind of doing it alone, but also doing it in community, right? Doing it vis-a-vis the work that I do, and then connecting with others through the arduous journey that I've been through. I know that's a little bit vague, but I don't want to go into all the details, but definitely that struggle with mental health. One of my children really struggled with addiction and mental health issues as well. And so really that journey and that struggle of me helping others in those situations, but then also going through it myself and my children has brought me to this place to really recognize that we're all always going to be on this journey, right? And we can come to places where we've grown, and then we're always continuing to grow. And so I always say we don't hurt alone, we shouldn't heal alone. And so my true heart is to really create spaces and places where we can all heal and come together and truly draw out that beauty that's on the inside of us so that our communities can be transformed.
Well, I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing your story, because I do think that's a really impactful thing for people to hear about those challenges. And from when you and I first connected, I have a background in social work. I love nature. I worked for quite a while in an addiction and mental health program for youth in the wilderness. And so when you're talking about, these metaphors of climbing mountains, that sense of achievement, I know one of the things you're passionate about, which we'll talk about, is actually using some of that probably too, the physical piece. But I love that idea for people to recognize that things aren't always going to be happy. They're going to be bumpy. And just that idea, like you said, of constant growth, that it's not a mountain peak that you go up and down, but it's, you hit a peak and you grow and you kind of hit the next peak and you grow and you keep hitting. And, that continual journey is a really critical piece of it.
It is, absolutely. And being able to embrace each aspect of it and seeing each aspect, the good and the challenging, as a gift, right? Which is hard to do, especially when you're in the thick of the really difficult stuff, to be like, what do you mean this is a gift, right? And yet it really is, because when we can truly tap into everything that's going on in our bodies and the world around us and not be afraid of it and not try to run and to try to hide from it, the breadth of experience of life, it just far surpasses anything that words could ever describe.
Totally. Well, and really, when we talk about growth too, growth often comes from being in that boggy, miry, unpleasant space. And the piece that I almost sometimes see as more dangerous is when you get into that space, or even when you get into a good space, and instead of either growing or having some challenges, you plateau. Mm-hmm. Right? And like that getting stuck, like things will always be this bad, or there's no way out of this, or I guess things are okay, so just going to coast forever.
Yes.
And that's, I know, something you talk about, like when you is what do you think is more dangerous? Is it the slump, or is it that plateau space?
Oh, I think that's a tricky one, right? Because that plateau space, you're absolutely right, is that, and the thing is, sometimes that plateau space is still even in that slump. Like we get to this slump and we're like, okay, well, we're not going down any further. We're just gonna stay here. But like, it's also not satisfactory, right? Like life isn't like, I don't believe that life is always about like just this happiness and joy and things that people are often posting on social media, like, right? But at the same time, I don't think we should ever grow complacent. We shouldn't ever grow complacent, even when it's just a little better. Like there's so much on the inside of us that to be able to say like, hey, to be able to tap in to truly our inner wisdom and truly our hearts. And our hearts will sort of tell us like, hey, this isn't all that there is for you. There's something more and something greater, right? And even when it's good, right? Even when life is sort of on that positive upswing, right? Plateauing even in those places, there's still something so much more. Because the reality is our life is not just about us, right? And when we become complacent, that means that we're satisfied with just the status quo for us. But our lives are meant to touch and impact the world around us, right? So when we're complacent, we're no longer doing that, like we're just sort of going in the by and by. And, you can tell when people are living in a place of either slumped complacency or passion and drive, right? And who are you attracted to? It's not those people who are slumps, right? It's not those people who are complacent. It's those people who are making changes. And I don't necessarily mean like those big CEOs or people with lots and lots of money doing amazing, powerful things, or like those iconic, people like Martin Luther King or Mahatma Gandhi. We're awesome, right? We are moved by them, but sometimes it's even those people in those small, delicate, and gentle ways. That you don't have to be the big mover and shaker, but in your community and in your way, right, you're doing something to change lives, to make a difference, to make an impact, no matter how big or small it is.
I mean, that is beautifully said. I agree with you 100%. Both, I truly believe humans both have a piece of belonging that's just this core need of ours, and also this piece of like contribution. right? And like that's such a defense factor against things like depression, because you feel like you matter to someone, like you are contributing. And you know what you're saying is also reminding me, I don't know if you've heard the story about the boy and the starfish.
Yes, I love that story.
So if anyone doesn't know it, right, a grandfather and his grandson are walking along the beach, and the boy's picking up starfish and he throws it in the ocean. And the grandfather says, well, you know, you're not going to be able to help all these other starfish. And he says, well, I could help that one. And that's really, to me, what you're speaking of is the impact that each of us can have on every single person that we contact without maybe even knowing about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But, you know, I'm sorry, I kind of interrupted.
No, please.
You know, I'd love to talk. I think, though, one of the things that's really hard is whether we're in that someplace, but especially in that complacency place, right? Is how do we get out of it, right? Especially when, and I think you alluded to this earlier, right? But it's like we've been trying, right? And I think about this situation with my own life, right? And then my own child who was really, really struggling. It's just like I was doing everything that I knew. Again, given my background, right?
Yeah.
I knew the right things to do, but nothing seemed to be working, you know? And at a certain point, I actually came to this place where I had actually stepped away from social services for a period of time because of what my son was going through. I knew that it was really important to take that step back, to be able to be there for my family. But then when I thought about like actually getting back into that work, the reality was like I did not feel competent. I really felt like through the situation that I had been through with my child was that I break people, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what my head was telling me. I knew that that wasn't really the reality, but that's what seemed that like that reality was so real. There was enough evidence out there because of, you know, seeing my child, things that my family had said, you know, and just everything going around, like seemed to just align to say, look, you break people and you failed. How is it that you think you can go out and impact the lives of other people because you can't even make a difference in the lives of your own family, right? And so we often get into these places where life starts coming down at us, whether it was for the first time you experienced it for the first time during COVID, or you've experienced it for many, many years, right? Life all of a sudden said, hey, game changer, I'm changing the tune, like we're doing something completely different, and life may tumble, and nothing you do and have the power to do, and anything that you've ever done in the past that seemed to work is going to work, right? Yeah. But it doesn't mean that you failed, right? It means that life is saying, hey, there's something else that I want you to learn. And so it's then our time to really learn to embrace that, but it's challenging, right? Because oftentimes, what does sort of like popular media, popular psychology say? It just, you know, pick yourself up from your bootstraps. Like, come on, you can do this. Think positively, you know, just let go of, you know, whatever, right? It's all this like stuff that you can physically do, right? That's not the reality, right? Sometimes we actually need to learn to just embrace and learn to let go and learn to allow life to flow through us and dictate and guide to us, right? And I think the more that we can do that, the more that we can understand our minds and our body, and then our connection and how those all work together to move us forward into that place out of our slumps or out of complacency and really propel us into the future that we were designed for, like that's when real transformation happens. Right. So it's like a multi-pronged approach, and it's really about learning to let go, which I think is really hard for us.
Well, it is, and I mean, first of all, can I just say, like, my heart broke when you said this idea of you breaking people, and that was a belief you took on at that time. And I mean, thank you for saying it too, because I don't think that's a unique experience, and especially as you're talking about like people trying to move past this and how complicated it can be, like when you are responsible for anyone else, how much that adds to the burden. Or like I think of my own time in leadership when I went through a tough time, I knew I wasn't serving my staff team, and how like heart-wrenching that was to feel like I was failing them. I can't imagine as a mother going through what you went through and trying to embrace that. And yeah, I just, your message is so powerful in, and a bit of a different approach. Like you said, it's not that toxic positivity of just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, individualistic, deal with it. It's really diving in. So when you meet people, and obviously this is not the instant transformation. Usually it takes a little work. How do you start off with them, or what are some things you'd suggest they start working with?
Sure. I think, the first thing is really understanding our minds and our bodies and how they work, right? Our bodies were designed to keep us safe. Our mind was designed to keep us safe, right? And so when we think back to sort of our beginnings, our roots as human beings, right? We think back to sort of like caveman period. And the threats that were out there were like, there's saber-toothed tigers that might come and eat me, right? And so our brains, right, and our minds were developed to look out for those threats and then protect us, right? So anytime we see a threat, our body creates a response, and it's normally fight, flight, or flee, right? There are some other responses, nurture and defend and protect, right? But oftentimes, our body goes into these automatic responses where it closes up, right? And that's normal, because you see a saber-toothed tiger coming at you and you're not gonna be like, oh, here, come kitty, let me come pet you, right? Like your response is like, I've got to go. Like I've got to do something so that he doesn't attack, right? And, even when, like, for instance, I'll give you this example, even when we know, right, when like scientists tell you, right, that like if you come across a tiger, right, you really, or lion, whatever, you shouldn't run from it. You make yourself really big. Several years ago, when I was living backcountry in Southern California, I was out on a run. And of course, like I said, I live backcountry, so the mountains were my backyard, so I'm out on a run and I stopped and I looked at this beautiful vista, and then I hear this noise behind me and I'm like, oh my goodness, that may be a mountain lion. And I know that I'm not supposed to run, but you know what? I am running, right? My defense is run as fast as you can, right? Even though we know sometimes like our defenses, our natural defenses are not necessarily the right thing to do in that moment, we still do them. Why? Because they're automatic responses, right? So when we can start to understand that, hey, look, our brain initially is looking for threats and looking to keep us safe. And anything that's different from what has already kept us safe in the past, like any behavior to do differently, like our body rejects, right? So if, for instance, you've been in a situation, maybe you've been in an abusive situation, right? Or maybe you've just been, and maybe it's not even an abusive, but like maybe you were like at the beach one day and you ended up like getting stung by a manta ray or a jellyfish, right? And there was something that happened in the water right before that, right? And so then you triggered like, hey, this happened. There was this movement, there was this sound, there was something, and then boom, I got stung, boom, I got bit, and that really hurt. The next time you go into a situation and you maybe the scene is the same, the sounds are the same, your body is going to react the same way, even if it's just a little kid kicking, in the water, right? And so our bodies go into these natural responses that were designed to keep us safe in a particular situation. But that's not always the best way for us to continue to move forward, because oftentimes we're not in those same threatening situations, right? And so when the situation is changed, we have to recognize when our bodies start moving into their automatic responses, we need to take a moment and try to tap into that second part of our brain to say, hold on, pause for 1 second. Let me just do a quick assessment and see, do I really need to run and flee? Or is there something else going on and I'm actually safe and okay, and I just need to learn how to calm down, right? So when we understand that our mind does that, it's not easy because, again, it's automatic what our body wants to do. But the more you can know what your body is doing, then you're able to then start to talk to yourself a little differently. And if you can learn some of those tips and techniques to really start to bring yourself back to center, to calm your body down, that makes a huge difference. So I'm a person of practice. And so I'd love to just, one of the things that I do when I notice that my body is starting to tense up, where there's something that's happened and I'm feeling a little anxious, I'm feeling like, uh-oh, I don't feel safe for whatever reason, right? First thing I do is hand on my heart, hand on my belly, right? And then I close my eyes and I just start slowing my breath down. And I try, sometimes it's harder, right? But Slowly inhale in through your nose and try to just take a slow inhale in for as long as you can. And then a gentle exhale out through your mouth. Right? And the more you can do that, and the slower and the calmer, right? Because some people do it. Like I've seen them, they're like, right? And no. You don't want to tense your body in the process, right? You just want to gently breathe in through your nose and exhale out through your mouth. And then the more, again, like I said, you can do that and increase the amount of time that you're inhaling, and sometimes even pause before you exhale, and then gently exhale out through your mouth, right? That makes a huge, huge difference. Other ways to kind of do it is you can even incorporate just arms open as you're inhaling and then down as you're exhaling, or even add some imagery in that, right? So inhale in, and I'm a big water person, right? So I imagine just a gentle wave like washing over me and washing out all of the stress, the negative thoughts, the negative emotions, and then exhaling out like the waves going out and pulling out all of the negatives, right? Inhaling back in that calm, gentle wave to just refresh me, to renew me, and exhale out that wave to take away those toxins, right? So just some calm centering, 2 minutes, three. I mean, I do these in the store, right? I do these out in public, and people look at me. I don't care. For me, it's what's needed. Sometimes people then start asking questions. What are you doing? It's just like, I'm a little anxious right now. I just give me a moment, right? So we're not talking about anything that costs a lot of money. We're not talking about anything that's difficult to do, right? It's about centering, right? And it's about bringing ourselves back to center. And if we can just do even 3 of those breaths, our brains can start to shift and begin to reassess their situation and make healthier decisions. Because what happens again, too, when we're in that fight or flight response, our brains close up. We don't get enough oxygen. So we can't think appropriately. So what you're doing now is you're telling your brain, hey, I'm giving you oxygen. Come on, start thinking for me, right? Other things that I do is I like to incorporate tapping, right? So just gently, taking your fingertips and just, closing my eyes, tapping on my forehead. There's prescriptions for it. Like I've seen classes, right? Oh, start here and start doing these mantras. I'm just like, dude, start tapping. You know what I mean? Like, don't complicate it. Just find those places where you're just like, as you tap, you're like, oh, that's a little sensitive. Let me sort of stay here, right? Because our body all over, like, we're filled with energy, right? And our body has these different points where stress, our emotions start to hang on to, and they're different for everybody. And so just find where they are in your body. And you don't have to conk yourself out in unconscious, right? But it's that gentle tapping, right? Because again, it actually starts to stimulate blood flow, and it starts to move not just the blood through our body, but I believe it's moving those emotions out of our body, right? So just trying to think about changing your thoughts. Like you've got this thought that comes in, because guess what? Like thoughts come in and out of our heads all the time. I can't remember the statistic, but we've got like millions of thoughts every day coming in our head. Most of them we just need to ignore, right? We shouldn't, even bother with them. But sometimes, right, the other thing is about our brains is that the more we think on something, a neural pathway is created, right? So it's like thinking about walking through a path in the forest, right? Or a field, right? And if you see a field that's never been walked on, and then you walk on it once, the grass goes down, but then it pops back up. But then you keep walking that path over and over and again. What happens? Like you can see a very clear path. You do that for years and years and years, like that path is like stuck, But guess what the beauty is you leave that path alone, you stop walking on it, and over time, regrowth happens. Our brains are the same way. And the redirecting those neural pathways is really, really hard, right? I find myself where it's like I'll get these moments where I'm like, oh, I'm doing so good, like creating these new neural pathways and like getting rid of old behaviors. But then all of a sudden something happens and you're put back in a situation that was so similar. And it's just like all that work that I've been doing for 6 months. But it's not gone, right? It's there. It's just like you realize like, oh, how quickly we go back, but we can still continue to work moving forward.
Well, I mean, I think what you're saying is absolutely wonderful. our current society, I would say, focuses so much on like this tiny portion of the brain, which is all like the logical thoughts and thinking your way out of a solution, which works well for plenty of modern society. Your job probably requires a lot of like, okay, what am I going to do and how am I going to do it? But when it comes to these, reactions, things that matter to us in an emotional way, you're so right that there is this component we need to build into our lives of like, what are we doing with our bodies? How are we giving our brains that oxygen, that right to relax and recognize that this might not be the kind of threat that you need to freeze over? So that's so wonderful. I'm wondering, how do you kind of link this for people long term? Because of course, in the moment, you're stressed, you start breathing, that creates a pathway. What's kind of like the long-term process for people to really apply that?
Sure. The reality is like just continuing to find opportunities to integrate in your life on a daily basis, right? So, find, again, it doesn't have to be complicated, but 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Again, when you're at the store, you're standing in line, you're on their phone, like, just start doing some tapping. I'm stretching, like I'm sitting here talking to people and I'll start stretching, right? Move your body, right? Because oftentimes, especially in our current society, so much of us end up doing our work sitting on a computer like this. Our blood is not flowing, right? Our muscles are not moving to the full extent that they need to. So just incorporating movement on a daily basis into your life. Finding ways, here's the other pieces too. Because, too oftentimes people talk about building habits, and doing this consistent. Some of us, my life has never been that way, to be able to say like, oh, Monday morning at 6 a.m. I do this, at 7 a.m. I do that. Like, it just doesn't happen. And especially if you're parents, I have the fortune of now being an empty nester, which I totally love. But actually for me, that's even like, I feel like I've got sort of more variability in my day because I'm not then subject to the schedules of my kids, right? So I can literally like say, oh, I'm going to do this, right? And I did that over the weekend. Said, you know what? Tomorrow morning, I'm going to fly up to volcanoes and spend the night, watching the stars, right? And so I personally, and I know that not everybody says this, don't feel so stuck in like, well, I must build it every morning at 7 a.m. I must build 10 minutes into my routine. Just, you know what? Just know like, hey, how am I going to get this in? Find little ways whenever you can, sneak them into your day. Breathing, stretching, just moving your body, and then connecting. The reality is, for me, how it is that I stay accountable to all of this stuff is by my connections. And it's 3 different types of connections. It's human connection, right? Ideally in person, this whole Zoom, right? Make sure that you're getting out and finding connections to actual people, right? Physical touch in a safe and healthy way is really important, right? Actually, when we hold hands with somebody, when we give somebody a hug, it releases oxytocin, which is that feel-good emotion in our bodies, right? So connecting with people, but connecting with people also, it helps hold you accountable. Healthy people, right? Connecting also with the environment, with the earth. I have like a rock, like sitting on my desk. I have plants all around. I actually brought to the office, I've got a fish with a plant in it, right? So finding ways to connect nature into your life on a daily basis. If you can't get out, ideally you get out to nature and you touch it. Hug the trees. I know it looks crazy, but it is so therapeutic, right? Get your feet in the dirt, in the sand, in the soil. Take your shoes and socks off because the earth is recharging, right? It gets energies back into our body, right? It actually replaces different ions and minerals that we just lose on a daily basis, especially when we're so connected to technology, right? So connecting with others, connecting with the earth, and then connecting with your source of a higher power, right? Whether, you see that as God, as you see that as the earth, some form of spirituality, but making sure that you stay connected to something greater than yourself. Because the reality is like, if we feel that we're in this world all alone, I don't know, like there's stuff that like, I think of my life and I think of so many people that I've worked with over the years, people who've been in like super dire situations. And if it wasn't for a level of grace miracles, like they would have never gotten out, right? And so if we don't have something else to bring us hope, it's going to be really tough. So for the long run, it's finding ways on a daily to keep them integrated, but having these connections is the most important thing, because in and of ourselves, we are weak and we are broken. But together, there's a beautiful word in South African language. It's called Ubuntu, and it's I am because you are, right? That we are so intricately connected, each and every one of us, that without the others, we cannot be our fullest. And without me, you can't be you, right? And so I think that if we remember that, then we remember and we have that power and that strength to continue to move forward, even in our toughest days.
Well, I mean, you've hit on the exact heart of one of the reasons that I focus on relationships and helping people find that connection to each other. So I absolutely love it. I can't believe how quickly time has flown, because we're just about at time here. It's been amazing. If people do have questions and want to reach out to you, what's the best way to be in contact?
Absolutely. You're welcome to call. You're welcome to email. I know that my information is here in the chat. I do also have a website, wellspringlifeintl.com. It is in a little bit redevelopment, but you're welcome to reach out as well. And I'm a big writer, so I do have articles on a lot of the stuff that I talked about and even more. So.
Awesome. Yeah, and that is in the description. So please feel free, reach out. I just want to say thank you so much. This was absolutely fantastic.
Well, and thank you so much for the opportunity. It has been such an honor to be here, to be able to share with you. And it's just been such a privilege to get to know you. And I just thank you for the work that you do, because without this work, transformation will be stymied, and so many people are out there looking for that opportunity for change, and doing it alone, it's hard, right? So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone who was able to watch and join. We will see you next week. And remember, every thought counts.